Retro.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we'll be beginning our discussion of Skeleton Crew with this episode. But before we dive into that, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media?
Absolutely. We are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So most of this episode will be a full spoiler discussion of episodes 1 and 2 of Skeleton Crew. We're probably going to spill over into our next episode as well. Those episodes are titled This Could Be a Real Adventure and Way, Way Out Past the Barrier. But Jay, let's kick it off with a little bit of non-spoiler discussion here, just so people get our thoughts in case they want to see what we think and before they watch it, and then we'll dive into some more details. What did you think of Skeleton Crew overall?
All right. Well, I tell you what, I've been so excited to talk to you about this because, you know, if for those listeners out there that have been with us for a while and we've been, eagerly anticipating this, I've been a little bit, had some trepidation and thought, gosh, I really want to like this, but I'm just not sure about it. And, some of the elements that we saw in some of the trailers and some of the advertisements and things, I was like, oh, I just don't know. And even just right at first, I thought, oh, I don't know about this. But I got to say, I got sucked in pretty quick. And it was just a ride from start to finish. And I found myself just smiling from ear to ear. And, I was so excited to tell people about this, as far as like, oh, you need to go watch this. And it's such a fresh Star Wars. And it's just, it's getting back to that simple joy that Star Wars used to make me feel. And I'm so happy about that, I have to say. And, here we are, we're just 2 episodes in. So I know that is, really gushing about this. And, there's definitely some things that as we talk through this, we'll get into. And I'm not saying that the series is perfect by any means thus far, but it's definitely got me hook, line, and sinker so far. So I'm fully in. But how did you feel?
I like it. I like it quite a bit. I'm with you. As we were talking a few weeks ago, we'll go on one of our news episodes. I just kind of lamented that I'm just not getting excited for this. And then like 2 weeks after that, we got all those clips that they put out on YouTube and Instagram that were even smaller little teaser snippets than what we got out of the official trailer. And you and I were talking about how we were a whole lot more excited after seeing that. And so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought the first episode was good, but it was the second one that really, really sold me as we started to get into, some of the mystery of what the show is going to be back. And they kind of set up those elements a bit more. And I just kind of felt like the second one had a bit more of the Star Wars elements than the first one did, but we'll kind of get into that as we go into discussion. So, I think as we were watching the first one, and it's about a 45 minute episode, and the second one's a little less than 30, I think. The first one was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is good. I'll stick around for it. But after the second one, I was like, ooh, give me more. I'm ready for more. So that was my thoughts on the whole thing. And I think it was smart for reasons that we're just gonna have to tease, since this is the non-spoiler portion of our discussion, for them to do the 2 episodes at once. Just for that reason, because that second episode really started to integrate, the various parts of the show together, the different characters and the different angles and things like that, and set us up on why, from what we saw in the trailer, Pirates are going to be after these kids. So
Right. Right,
Yeah.
right. And still
So,
left us with some, great questions too
a
that
lot of great
as
questions.
we oh
Yeah.
yeah, that I'm sure we're gonna dive into.
All right. Well, cool. So there you go. Jay and I give it 2 thumbs up. And if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to be spoiled about anything, this would be a good place to press pause. And we are going to get into our spoiler part of the conversation right now. So, okay. Yeah, Jay, they've been promoting this thing as Star Wars kind of meets the Amblin Entertainment type of style movies, with Goonies and the like. And that wasn't just hyperbole. That was exactly
Mhm.
what this was. I thought that there was no more apt description than what we got there. But what did you think?
Mhm. No, I would agree, and I would even throw in a little Stranger Things with that
Hmm.
as well, just with the feel of the whole thing. And that was one of the things that I was like, "Oh, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this." And like I said, when it first started, I thought, "Oh gosh, this is way too Earth-like. What are we doing?" And I shouldn't say right away because obviously right away we get right into some action.
Hmm.
But it was after we, got to the neighborhood and got to see some of the kids that I thought, "Ooh, I don't know about this." But then I was enamored for sure with everything going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was one of the things that I noticed weeks ago or months ago. We both talked about this, that from the trailer, it looked very much like suburbia.
Yeah.
And at least in that part of it, and on the name of this planet is At Atten here.
Mhm.
And it looked like it was just, open your window, look outside in your neighborhood and just advance it to like 50, 60 years in the future and land a few aliens there. And that's what you're looking at. But that being said, with this show, they integrated a lot more aliens and droids and a lot more speeder traffic and stuff like that, which enhanced the Star Wars feel considerably more, I think, than what we were getting from the trailers
Mhm.
initially, and really helped out there.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I kinda came to a revelation about, and maybe this is totally off base, but, and this is skipping way ahead to the 2nd episode where we find out that At-Aten is considered this legendary myth type of planet that
Uh huh.
only exists in stories, that I thought, "Well, I wonder if maybe that's by design," is the fact that it almost reminded me then of something like from Indiana Jones, where they had the
Sure.
fake, nuclear neighborhood kind of thing that was just set up just because, or, some of these other types of setups, even like WandaVision, so sort of a thing that's real but not real, that is completely mastered in a specific way that's not supposed to be like the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into the mystery of At in here in a bit
Yeah.
because that's a huge, huge part of all of this, and that may not be until the next episode, but we'll see. I will say this though, I mean, it was a bit distracting to have things seem so familiar, and I'm not talking about
Mhm.
Star Wars familiar, I'm talking real world familiar here.
Right.
That house, I mean, with the garages, I mean, the details of this, it's kid has an overstuffed bedroom and that was Weem, and then he's down eating at the kitchen counter for his breakfast and stuff like that. And so it was a little bit distracting in that regard, but again, you've got an Ithorian walking their dog or whatever that critter was down the street,
Right.
and you got a droid
On
mowing
a
the lawn.
sidewalk. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got, speeder bikes and droids all over the place. So that was enough, and just kind of trying to pick all those things out in the background pulled me back into it, I suppose.
Mhm, mhm. And I mean, even down to the school,
Mhm.
desks and rows, and I know we saw that in The Mandalorian as well, and so there was a little bit of an earthly touch in that way, but this was just a little too on the nose in some ways.
Sure, sure. Well, then we get to meet our cast of kids pretty quickly, and the four main kids are Weem, who's the first one we meet. He's got the longer, curlier hair. His buddy Neil, who is not an Orlin, but is some sort of elephant-like species. I kept thinking of the Pakifantos that we got to meet in
Ah,
that Hondo Anaka book,
there
the
you
Flight of the
go.
Falcon thing, but it's not them. And then we've got Fern, who is, I don't know how you describe her. She's kind of a bit more street savvy than the other kids, and she's the more adventurous one. She's the one that keeps coming up with all these outrageous stories that, they're out and out lies that she tells everyone to make her points or to tease kids. She calls everyone else gullible for believing it. And then we've got KB, and that's the young lady with the visor on it, which kind of reminds me of Geordi from Star Trek: The Next Generation, except for, it appears like it's a cybernetic type of a thing, like kind of like a Lobot
Mhm.
almost. But
Mhm.
but of the four, which one was your favorite?
Oh gosh. That is such a hard thing to ask me at this point because it's
Mhm.
so early on. I like each one of these characters for their own reasons.
Sure.
Obviously Wim he's just and I think his name says it all. He's very whimsical in a lot of ways, and he's obsessed with fantasy, and he's obsessed with the Jedi, and he's obsessed with everything that is not of his world. And
Mhm.
so that's just very endearing. And then, I mean, come on, Neil is Neil. I mean, the bubble bath, hello, that was the
Yeah.
cutest thing ever. Fern, I like just because she's a rebel, and she's the kind that is going to do things just because it's what is not expected of her. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that her mom is the undersecretary, and so that's going to be her way of going against that and doing her own thing, even though she's super smart, obviously, because she was what, like head of the class or, top honors or whatever.
Mhm.
And then KB is just so funky cool. And I
Yeah.
like that. And although she does, I think, tend to want to not bow to Fern, but does things for her and with her because she doesn't know how to say no to her. Even when she was teasing the boys and she says, "Fern made me do it," kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like, she's kind of along for the ride. So, I like each one of them. I know it's a cop out answer, but I do like each one of them right now for their own reasons. So, I don't have a favorite, but do you have a favorite?
I think it's Fern. When it comes
Mhm.
down to it, she's just kind of take charge. And okay, so let me, go with me here for a second. These kids are kind of like light versions of our main Star Wars characters. And the way I look at them is this: Liam is kind of a Luke Skywalker type. He's tired of this life at school. He wants to go on adventures, and his mind is never on what he's doing or where he is, as Yoda would have chastised him for, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Fern is a Han Solo type, a bit of a
Oh, yeah.
scoundrel, bit of a rogue. And, she's, the way she talks to him and the others, that's, you could totally see Han talking to Luke or in that way in A New Hope. KB is the loyal sidekick type that Chewbacca was. Obviously, she's not a Wookiee, and that's not the
Mhm.
comparison I'm making. Just kind of
Sure.
because at one point, she's telling Fern, she's like, "You don't have to be so mean," and so she's kind
Right.
of Fern's conscious in that guard. So that leaves Neil, and honestly, I kind of feel like he's a combination of C-3PO and R2-D2 when it
Oh, I
comes
love
down
that.
to, yeah, I mean, because
Yeah.
he's a little on the fussy side, very concerned about what's happening to Weem. I gotta keep saying that it's Wim, not Weem. Uh, but uh, but and then is got some utilitarian abilities as well in there. So anyways, that's how I kind of looked at the four of them there. They
Mhm.
they fit into these classic Star Wars archetypes that way.
Sure. And they all have very different family upbringings too. I mean,
Hmm.
you've got Neil who has this kind of nuclear family, and you get the idea that when he goes home, mom's got the blue milk and cookies kind of thing going on, and he's got the siblings, and it's more of that, kind of fun feeling family sort of thing. And then poor Wim, I hate to say poor Wim, but his dad is a workaholic. He's never
Right?
home. He's on his own. He's got
Mom's
to be
gone.
responsible. Yeah, we don't know what happened to mom. Never,
Hmm.
never said. And then again, like I said, Fern is just kind of, mom is this very important person. And so, she's finding her rebellious side, and we have no idea what's going on with KB. So we have no family, anchor for that. But, so they're all coming from these very different backgrounds, some of which we have an understanding of. And and others we have a very limited understanding of, and
Right.
maybe not at
Right.
all. Hmm.
Okay, so those are the kids, but I want to back up for a minute. Before we even meet them, we have, I wouldn't necessarily call it a crawl. It kind of reminded me of what they did with Solo,
Yes.
with the giving us some lines, but it's in that classic blue font, a long time
Hmm.
ago in a galaxy far, far away. And it reads, since the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has maintained order. And yet, remote hyperspace routes are increasingly plagued by piracy. These pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as a sign to all ships: surrender or die. And they even go so far as capitalizing all the letters and keywords like Empire, New Republic, and Pirates there, just like
Yeah.
they would have done in the yellow scrolling crawl that they would do in the movies there. So that kind of sets our stage right before we get this very dramatic pirate takeover of a freighter. I mean, it's a complete boarding action and everything. So, what did you think about that crawl and then the following scene?
So I totally agree with you on the crawl. And I think
Mhm.
it was very appropriate the way that they did it, because it was sort of that blend between, the traditional that we see in the movies and, like you said, something right out of Solo. And it
Mhm.
wasn't as abrupt as what we, didn't get in Rogue One, where you just got the "Vroom," and then you were at the planet. So from there, wow, intense right away. And I have to say that I actually jumped when the first battering ram hit the side of the hull of the ship,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, this is Star Wars, this is like pirate space pirate Star Wars stuff. This is so cool." And then you see all the different beings, running around the ship, and you get this grand entrance of these different pirates coming in. And so I just was like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this felt like so many different things. One, the boarding ramps, they plunge into the side of the ship. I mean, that and it's very much like what you see in pirate movies. Like when one
Oh
ship,
yeah.
they're boarding another one, and they throw across the grappling hooks and planks and everything else, and then they go storming aboard the other ship. But even beyond that, this had to be an homage to A New Hope in the opening scene when the Tantive 4 is getting boarded. All the people on the freighter are running into position, waiting for those doors to open on those ramps.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
instead of stormtroopers coming out, it's the pirates there. And then ultimately, we get
Good.
Captain Silvo marching through when things are kind of cleared, as opposed to Darth Vader. So there was that. But beyond that, the boarding ramps themselves, the way they plunge into that ship and they kind of had that sprawling open thing, that reminded me a lot of the Separatist technology that we got to see in the Clone Wars when they'd send those ships that were full of battle droids in there and they'd plunge into the hull and then open up and spill out the contents.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think they did a really good job with that, kind of alluding to other classic Star Wars elements.
Mhm. No, I totally agree. And then there was also, the as it should be, the pirate feel, like Pirates of the
Uh huh.
Caribbean kind of thing too. Totally with that.
Yeah. So we get this great action sequence with the pirates fighting the crew of the freighter, and then another homage to A New Hope when Captain Silvo finds the captain of this whole thing, and the captain is claiming that this is just a freighter vessel and they don't have any treasure on board, and then instead of there's no ambassador, it's like, well, if this is just a freighter, why is if you have no treasure, why is the vault sealed? You could just
Yes,
see Darth Vader throwing that
exactly.
back in his face.
Totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, there was no treasure. There was just a single Republic credit lying on the floor of this ship there. Okay. Are we to believe that Captain Silvo is anyone other than Jad Wood, Jude Law's character?
No, I mean, you could even hear it in his voice. I knew
Yeah.
that from the first second. It has to be. It absolutely has to be.
Yeah. I was very curious by that decision. I mean, because we'll see him at the end of the second episode, and we'll get to that in a bit. But they've been billing his performance and this character up to the release as that he's acting like he's supposed to be some sort of a Jedi, but then they've been telling us, well, is he really what he appears? And so already your suspicions heightened, and then they only thinly disguise him. I mean, it would be cool if there was some sort of a twist to that comes lately, but it doesn't seem that way.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I mean, I'm not upset by that. But, I mean, I think part of that too is we've also been told or hinted at that there was a lot of inspiration from Jack Sparrow. I mean,
Right.
again, Pirates of the Caribbean. And so this is definitely something that a Jack Sparrow move would be, this grandiose plan that turns out to be one credit. That's totally Jack Sparrow right there.
Right.
So I could
Right.
see
Yeah.
them framing him in that
I
way.
I thought the same thing when I watched this.
Uh-huh.
Is like, this is such a Jack Sparrow move. We've seen
Yep.
this scene in
Yeah.
multiple places of the Pirates of the Caribbean. So, no, I wasn't upset with that. It's just kind of as one of the things that they've been building up for this series is the mystery of who Jod is,
Mhm.
to kind of almost blow it in the first 3 minutes of the whole series, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Was
No, I
was
do
an
know what you
interesting
mean.
is an interesting move for me there. So,
So
but
I
then
have to
this.
say though, real quick, what
Mhm.
was the name of the second in charge that actually came onto the ship first? That
Oh,
was it.
the Shistevan.
Yes.
That is Brutus.
He was stinking cool. Okay, he is probably my favorite new non-centric character that has come on screen in a long time. His look is just fabulous. I just love it. I just have to say that.
Oh yeah, I thought the pirate crew was pretty cool all around. But he was a standout
Yeah.
character. Came on board with the double blasters, shooting everything, and then he cleared the way for Silvo. But we get Vane again from
Oh,
season
yeah.
3 of The Mandalorian.
Mhm.
He's back. He's the Nikto,
Yep.
and then we got Jaleel White's character Gunter
Mhm.
with the cybernetic eye. And then there's Anishi Tib who gets one of his eyes shot out in that
Yeah.
fight. And then there's others as well. There's a Quarren, and I'm trying to remember what the other species are, but they do,
There's a whole bunch.
yeah. There's quite a few pirates there, and I thought they did a great job with that
Mhm.
crew. Okay, so one of the things that's going on here is that the kids are already getting ready to take their career assessment tests, and this is a classic. I don't want to necessarily call it a trope, but our lead character Wim is not prepared for this. Didn't even realize it was going to be coming up the next day. And meanwhile, Neil's all into it, ready to take this and forge his future. Kind of reminds me of Lisa from The Simpsons in
Oh,
that
yeah.
regard. And then you got the other kids are all in this, and so the undersecretary is there asking them all what they're interested in doing when they pass this test and the like. There, and of course, Wim doesn't make it to the next day because he's got to fend for himself with his dad being so busy at work. And that's where we stumble upon the ship. He thinks it's a Jedi temple, and kind of this gets disclosed to Fern, and she jumps his claim on all of this. But again, the assessment test itself. What do you think about this notion that you take this one test and it pretty much dictates the rest of your life's direction?
Yeah, I mean, that's some high stakes right there, and I mean, in these kids, they had an answer for everything, that they knew what they wanted to try to test out for, and so I think that the emphasis that was placed on, this great work is that everyone has a place and there's a place for everyone, and that everyone has to do their part to, basically contribute in some way, shape, or form. And this is the most important thing in their lives. And that's a lot for a kid at that age
10-year-old, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it's not really unlike what the Jedi expect, as far as, okay, you've got this ability, this is your life path, this is where you're going to go. So this is more of a vocational type of thing where there's obviously several different paths available, but it's not very much unlike that, they put him on a path and that's it.
Yeah, and then Neil was teasing Wim afterwards. It's like, can't believe you told everyone you wanted to be a Jedi.
Right. Yeah.
I
Speaking
didn't
of
say I wanted to be a
Jedi.
Jedi. It's like, you pretty much told everyone you wanted to be a Jedi. And you can tell by the looks on the other kids' faces. They're all talking about, wanting to be some sort of an analyst type of position. These very much, middle management type things
Yeah.
when it comes down to
Supply
it.
chain controller or whatever. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah. And then here's what I'm talking about. I want to be in a position to help people that are in danger and stuff like that. And then, and that's like unheard of here on out. And because, that's what they have the security droids for.
Right. Yeah.
That's not a
It
job for
just
people.
right.
And,
Exactly.
so two things also from this conversation that are going to be important to later in our conversation. One, the you mentioned the great work. That's a
Mhm.
detail that pay attention to that because
Right.
we're familiar with those from another source. And two, they talk about the Jedi like they're commonplace, that they're still around.
Mhm.
And this is taking place at the time of the Mandalorian, and as far as we know, there's one Jedi running around the
Right.
galaxy.
Mhm.
So, some clues to a later part of this discussion.
Right, and I think that that has a lot to do with the mystique of At-Aten as well.
Mhm. Indeed, indeed it does.
Mhm.
But so, Wim gets in trouble. His dad has to come down to the school and convince the proctor to let him take the assessment test the next day. He's doing so with a 50-point penalty, which means he's going to have to get a perfect score on the whole thing in order to pass. Which, I mean, wow, you were just talking about it, like the pressure they're putting on these kids' shoulders at the age of 10.
Mhm.
That they just doubled down on it right there.
Yeah, indeed. And even though it seems like a very, affluent type of a society, if you were to change the tone of the colors and everything, I mean, it would be a very industrialized, type of situation for these kids, almost like, working in the mines kind of thing. And this is your job and this is what you're destined to do. Backing up for just a second too, there was a couple things. One, did you get an Etch-a-Sketch vibe when
Yes.
Wim was he was making his little Jedi?
Yeah, very much so. It was, the first time I watched it, I didn't see the controls, and I was like, "That's an interesting way of drawing," but it was the second time when you could see him turning the 2 dials on the side of the
Yeah,
screens. I was like, "Yeah, that's very much Etch-a-Sketch, yeah."
totally an
Good point.
Etch-a-Sketch. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then the other thing too that I thought was interesting was that Wim picked up very quickly from when Fern and KB were gliding alongside of their school bus
Mhm.
on the first day that we see him going to school, that he saw them going over the exact same ravine, taking the shortcut to get to school, and that's how he knew to go that way.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
I did. Yeah, that's a good point, except for it doesn't work out the way he
It
thinks.
right, yeah, and I
'Cause
think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, Fern's speeder was a little more souped up than Wim's was, and how about his little, flyer things on his little tassels on his handlebars?
like a
How
kid's
cute was
bike.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So again, it was a very earthly kind of a thing, but it was also very endearing in that way too. I loved that.
Yeah, and I think the other part was that, yeah, Fern had the better bike, but we also see it break down because the power converter,
Right.
blew out, and I think her shortcut wasn't just a straight line. And
Oh,
that was where
sure.
Wim made his mistake because she had no idea. She'd never seen that area of the ravine until he started talking about it, and
Mhm.
then she figured out where it was. So let's get to that part. He's convinced he's found a Jedi temple. He's obsessed with the Jedi. He's got that storybook. I don't know what is a data pad that's got all those Jedi stories on it.
Like a
Uh,
ViewMaster. That's what it
y-
reminded me of.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Without looking through it, like how you click the ViewMaster, remember that?
Right, right. And then you were kind enough to send me that video that translated all the Arbesh. I was glad to see that because the image on my computer screen was too blurry for me to make out all the
Mhm.
words. Nothing super significant in those stories yet, but it kind of gives some of the background. He is aware of Jedi temples that could sink into the ground, a la the one that we saw in Rebels.
Right.
And they come back up to the surface when there's danger. And so one of the stories is about that. There's another Jedi that wanders through the forest and encounters a monster, and some basic Jedi stories that don't have a ton of clues yet in them. But he's convinced he's found a Jedi temple, and then he tells Neil about it as opposed to going home to study for his makeup exam. He gets Neil to get his dad's tools, and they go to dig it out so they can explore. Only find out that the girls are there and they've called claimsies. Another fun moment. I mean, I could, that's not something I've heard kids use in the past 20 years or so that I've been a parent, but that's like something that kids would have said in the 80s. Definitely,
Oh, for
claimsies, no
sure.
takebacks or, that type of thing. So
Right.
that was kind of fun to see. there.
And that's another thing too, I think, as far as like this particular very protected planet, if you will,
Mhm.
is very innocent in that way, to be able to do claimsies and stuff like that. But I mean, it just shows that kids are kids no matter where you go, because you can almost kind of even see this happening with, Anakin and Wald, on
Sure.
Tatooine. By the way, your speeder, so wizard.
Yep. 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 Another
That
good.
was so cool. I was like, "Yes."
They end up
Love
using
it.
Wizard a couple times in
They
these
did.
2 episodes there. Alright, so let's wrap up this episode with a brief discussion of they get into what Wim thinks is a Jedi temple, and it makes sense because of the door that they open there. KB hooks up, an attachment to her visor and is able to power the thing open, but then they get trapped inside, and they follow a power conduit to basically the engine. They get that started, and then Wim can't help himself but press the green
Oh
flashing
gosh.
button, which
Yes.
activates the ship, and then it takes off into space. But there's a couple things we didn't really get a whole lot of discussion of this barrier that surrounds the planet, but they go through it, and it's a bunch of spaced out lights in the sky that are obscuring space, and they get past the barrier, and they ask, "Are those planets?" No, they're stars. They haven't seen
They've
stars
never seen them. Yeah.
before, which kind of gets into the mystery of AT-AT there. So,
Right.
we're and the thing is that I don't know about you. The first time I watched episode one, I wasn't picking up on all these things the first time. It was only after you went back and the second time that it's like, oh wow, that seems important. That's important. That's important. And the
Mhm.
barrier, is kind of like, oh, that's unusual. But I didn't really give it a whole lot more thought after that until we got into the second episode.
Yeah, because you really don't think about, well, what is the barrier
Hmm.
until you realize that it's just a bunch of green swirling clouds, essentially, that
Hmm.
is sort of creating this dome over top of the planet itself and masking the planet in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
then the ship jumps to hyperspace, and they're all screaming. I thought that was such a great way
that was
to
awesome.
end this episode. That was so much fun.
It really was. And we have to talk about our droid, SM-33.
In the
We
next
haven't touched
episode,
on him.
we will
Is
do
that
that.
okay? All right,
Yeah,
all right.
because we are
But I
about
did
out of
think it
time here.
was, yeah, the one other thing I thought was really cool, though, was just the fact that the ship itself, the way that it was oriented was
Hmm.
upside down, and you didn't realize that it was really upside down until after Wim hits that green button, and then it starts to
Actually,
rotate.
I was beginning to wonder, yeah, because when he hit the green button, the, headphones fell out of the seat
Right, mhm.
and were upside down, but yeah, and the seats were on the ceiling, so, that was a little bit of a clue there, but right, it was kind of impressive watching that ship pull up out of the ground and flip over and catch
And
all
how
the trees
big
on
it
there on fire.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
very cool.
alright, well, we got a lot more to discuss,
We do.
especially, we primarily concentrated on episode one and this one, and then on Monday's episode, we'll talk more about episode two and some of the overall mysteries that we got from both of these episodes, plus some other references and things like that that came up. But yeah, that'll do it for this first episode covering Skeleton Crew. This is fun, Jay. I can't wait to get to the
Oh,
next
yeah.
one. But
Mhm.
thank you all for joining us here on Podcast Stardust as we dive into that. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you hit subscribe on your podcatcher choice so you'll get our additional discussions of Skeleton Crew as we work our way through this season. And while you're there, make sure you like, rate, follow, review, all those things. We appreciate all of that. And then you can find all of the previous episodes of Podcast Stardust over at retrozap.com, all previous 816 of them. And you can find the other great shows that are part of the network, including Agent Shield Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dork Lair, Doomcast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and Warp Trails. Like I said earlier, don't forget to rate and review the show. Apple Podcasts is a great place for that. And Jay, I want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we are located on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest pages. And we do have two YouTube outlets. So we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And if you'd like to correspond in real time, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. And the best one is on Discord. So if you want to go ahead and do that, the link to that is in our show notes. And while you're there, you can check out all of the other rooms for the the other RetroZap shows. And we also have a TeePublic store with lots and lots of Podcast Stardust gear. So if you need a gift for someone or yourself, the perfect place to go is to TeePublic.
All right, you want to remind everybody what you got going on in cosplay?
Oh, yeah. So actually, as this comes out, I will be heading to Columbus for GalaxyCon. And so I will be updating everybody on all of my goings on there. And you can always catch me on my Instagram, which is at j.simscosplay, for all of my other adventures.
Okay, so upcoming on the show, like I said earlier, Monday we'll be reviewing the Skeleton Crew some more. And then on Wednesday, we'll be doing some Phantom Menace trivia. We've been having fun with that. So make sure you come back and joining us for all of that. Well, that'll do it for episode 817 of Podcast Stardust. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.